the strengths and challenges of having the e-government unit in the Ministry of Communication as opposed to being under the Prime Minister's office or another ministry? Thank you.
So thank you, Session3, for the questions. It's actually very good questions, and whenever I make a presentation, there's always some questions come. So once again, thank you. So talking about the stakeholders on the ICT strategies, talking particularly of this ICT policy, we have two stages of the ICT policy, and for the first draft, we actually working with the UNDP and also involve from other stakeholders, also from the government agencies and also others. Private institutions also invite for the discussions in making ICT policy. And for the second one, in 2009, we upgraded the national ICT policy, and then we got the experts from JICA, Japanese one, and also they work closely with NIDA, ICT office, and not just these two parties, we also invite like the NGOs in Cambodia to involve also. So we made this draft already, and then we are now in the process of putting it to the National Assembly. So there's a certain procedures for getting it published officially. So in every stages, we always engage the ministries, the officials from the ministries, and NGOs, and of course, particularly my authority person. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kali, for your question. The issue of the marketing, the systems which we developed is a very important issue. In fact, in general, the back office systems, it is very easy to make the marketing, because that kind of systems can be used by the civil servants, so we can disseminate the information by using the official letters. So it's quite easy, but the difficult one is the front office systems. As one good example is that we have the OK Life systems, where very elderly people or some lower income people can apply for some social benefits from that portal side. We do one-stop service, but it is not so much marketed to the audiences. So it's another big consideration for us to make the market here. One way of the marketing the systems is first, we use the system developers. System developers usually have a very good PR networks, so they can use the networks. So we ask their help usually, but still we need to make more effort in marketing the existing systems or in developing systems. Thank you.
I'd like to answer the moderator questions about in our country. MIC is in charge to develop state master plan for whole country, and then we submit the Prime Minister. Based on the master plan decided by Prime Minister, each ministries and provinces, they have to develop own master plan for them, and then MIC have to appraise all master plan of ministry and provinces. And also MIC after that have to guide provinces and ministries to implement their own master plan. After that, they have to monitor it and assessment. For example, we have to assessment and announce the ranking of the website and like that. MIC to implement only some flagship project like the dedicated network and GITC and like the main basic technical infrastructure. Yeah, that is.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor to the questions. Anybody on the floor from the back there?
Thank you very much, sir. Having listened to all the submissions, I have observed an interesting trend, and that is the fact that so far there hasn't been much of the presentations have reflected a kind of top-bottom approach towards e-governance. And I feel that is not very, very ideal, particularly given that a lot of the presentations have not shown the extent to which civil societies and community and special interest groups do influence e-governance policies. And in that respect, it kind of undermines the very legitimacy of e-governance at the end of the day. I'll take particular interest in the case of Korea. Being at the pinnacle of the global e-governance index, that didn't do very much for the country during the 2008 presidential elections. You get to realize that the 2008 presidential elections in Korea witnessed the lowest voter turnout in the history of democratic Korea. Despite the country achieving all these things, it kind of shows a level of apathy, civil society apathy. People are not interested in what government is all about. So we have an entity of government somewhere and society also separated. So I want to find out how e-governance is moving towards integrating these two elements. And if Korea is at the top of it and still glaringly lacks this, then I'm afraid of what's happening for the least developed countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, and the rest. And I'd also like to ask one more important thing regarding the least developed countries. What is the level of accessibility for vulnerable people, especially people with some form of disabilities, who may not be able to access some of the IT services? I want to get the take on that from the least developed countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Professor from Japan. Before lunch, so just I give you a quick question. Maybe you give me a short answer. Regarding the presentation by Vietnam and Cambodia, you made some very interesting applications like a passport or e-tax and so on. But if you think about population-wise issues, like Japan, we have the 70% of the population in city area. Maybe in Vietnam and Cambodia, the other side, 70% living in rural areas. So they ask the priority of the e-government applications. E-passport is important than the e-agriculture, e-local rural development, or telecenters. So how can you make the shifting the priority of the e-government applications? I think e-agriculture, electric agriculture, or e-farm or something is much more interesting to the people in your countries to get the e-governance.
any other questions from the audience?
In Vietnam case, I would like to introduce Mr. Tuyên. He is the Vice Department here to answer your questions.
Okay. I think that those obvious questions are quite interesting, and I shared with you yesterday about the situation in Vietnam that many people still in the rural area talking about e-government is something simple, but implementing is something quite different. And in Vietnam, the government focused first of all on how to provide e-services. We categorize it into different stages. We think first of all to try to provide we think a pragmatic way that something is simple we use first. So we provide the e-services to those who can use the internet to access this. So we have first we focus on the internet management. We organize something like e-office, electronic office, so that every government employee needs to use the computer for the daily work. And we have the list of what we call extensions, e-services, that every ministry, every province must provide up to the 2015. For example, like land registration, like a tax, e-tax, like a passport, and some others. For the people in the rural area, we think it's quite much harder for them to access the government services. So we combine some other methods. Like we have the system of what you call communal posts and conference posts, which located in every commune. So where people can go there, like something like a telecenter, you may call it telecenter somewhere. People can go there where they provide like telephone services, internet services, so that people can go and find information and talk with the people in that center. Let me check that. I may need some information about the price of some of their agricultural products that they may provide. So how can they sell it? Where can sell it? And so on. They can search through the internet. So we think we have some project to try to provide content to the farmer, like the Ministry of Rural and Development and Agriculture. You may know this in the Obama, which is mine. They provide content like the markets for the farmer and the weather forecast and some other technical support, how they can cultivate for some kind of rice or aquaculture and so on. So we combine not only the internet, but we also use the radio, use the TV, and as the kind of channels that the farmer can access. So we think that something like combine internet go to from the central government to the communal community employee, where those people can provide information to the villages.
Cambodian case, so let me just respond. Actually, regarding e-agriculture or the e-transport or e-visas, if we look at the national right-to-go strategy of the government wants to do it at once. Like they want to develop all the areas at once, but then it depends on the individual ministries and those who are responsible for the particular applications like e-visas that is under the ministries of interiors. So then it depends on the individual ability of the ministry. It doesn't mean like the government ignore that e-agriculture. So we are actually also looking at that areas, but then again when it comes to the applications, it's always requires some fund. And so then it comes to the ability of the individual industries. Ministries, and then how they can get fund to sponsors and support the project. Thank you. I hope I answered your questions.
as for the e-farmers or e-agriculture, Korean government has developed digitalization since 1980s and 1990s. Afterwards, we felt that there are certain areas which the government did not give any attention. That is the rural areas. So in 2001, as far as I remember correctly, then we started the so-called INVIL project, Internet Information Village Network, which is some kind of human-made information village. At the beginning, that INVIL project was started with the purpose of preventing digital divide. But later on, the members of the villages are making their home pages, and they are starting to selling their products by e-commerce, directly to the vendors. So, and nowadays the INVIL residents are becoming richer and richer. So we can say that with the help of the informatization, we can also mature, or we can also develop the rural areas. So I don't know whether this is a bit answer to your question.
May I just add a little more actually to answer the gentleman back there mentioned about the ICT accessibility in these developed countries, well, in Cambodia. Regarding this, I don't really have a clear statistic figures, but then I can just tell you roughly. Most of people, like Dr. Obi has mentioned, they live in the rural areas. So actually the infrastructures, ICT infrastructure is mostly available in the capital cities, which is about 10% of the populations living in the capital city. So then the level of ICT accessibility is still, thinking about the whole population is still low. Even though the mobile access is saturated, then other application of ICT is still limited in the provincial areas. You satisfied with the questions? The answer? Sorry. No? Probably she can add more. Vietnam case.
In about the Vietnam case, here is with Dr. Obi. We have the project IFC, that means information for communities. That is idea from the Japan. And as you know that we have more than 70% of farmers, and they live in the area, remote area, and they are like a lot of technical infrastructure. Also, they like literacy, IDF literacy, and its knowledge is a very low level. So when we implement that project, we have a lot of difficulties. The first, we have to, with this project, first we have to do like a pilot with the Hòa Bình province only. And from that, we have to done some training for even the management level, like the CIO and something like that. And we, step by step, we develop and implement very simple management system for them. And also we very interested about the infield from Korea. And we would like to share with the Korea many experience about the infield to apply for IFC in our country.
the question on voter apathy hasn't been answered, but I'll take it from here. I think there's a direct link between e-government and voter apathy. I mean, if you take the case of the U.S., there's been voter apathy for the last 25 years in the U.S. You're lucky to get 40-50% of vote in by-election years. So there's no real direct link between voter apathy and e-government. It goes beyond e-government. It goes into what's important for the voter at that particular time. So there's no real direct link, as far as I'm concerned, between e-government and voter apathy. Thank you. Any other questions? Got one more over here.
Yes. Hi, my name is Papa. I'm actually in university studying e-government right now. And before I came to Korea, the general impression that I had, or most of my colleagues had, was since Korea is #1 in e-government, chances are most of the citizens understand what e-government is because they use it so effectively. Now, through my research, I found out that actually most people I ask about e-government don't even know what it is. And those who don't know what it is, sometimes I even go further to say, okay, think about what your government is doing for you and see how it's being used through ICT. And even with that, a lot of students I've interviewed look at my face with a blank stare. So how are we, letting citizens know exactly what government does for them, and in that trying to get them to understand what e-government is so that we get more interaction? Because I can't figure out how, even if the country that's #1, a lot of citizens don't even know what e-government is or don't even know what their government is doing for them, how we're going to be able to manage to get it fully utilized in most of the countries around. My second question, which has to do with m-government, which we keep talking about. Now, part of the reason why mobile penetration is so high in a lot of countries, especially underdeveloped countries, is because mobile phones are cheaper, much cheaper than buying a PC, or the infrastructure is cheaper for the individual to get access to. However, these cheaper mobile phones that a lot of people have are simple phones, not smartphones. Now, we keep interchanging smartphones and mobile phones, they're not the same. Smartphones are typically like little mobile computers. So it comes back to using computers. Whereas mobile phones are, most of the mobile phones that most of the citizens have are simple text-based phones. So the question I have is, in talking about m-government and talking about moving to m-government, are we building systems or building applications that are taking advantages of these simple tools? Or are we still trying to keep them web-based, complex, where you need a smartphone to access? Because if we say that, then the statistics we keep giving is not relevant. So I want to know what the strategies are in terms of making these tools simple so simple phones can use them, A, and then B, what are we doing to educate citizens and people around the world about what government is doing for them, what their governments are supposed to do for them, and as such how the government services are going to be enhanced to better their lives so we can get better interaction and better responses from the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shim?
Because the ordinary people may not know the e-government systems or issues sometimes, but we have indicators which measures that whether the general citizens have used the e-government systems or e-government products. So the question was that, like, how often did you print out your document, public document from the internet, like that kind of questions. So in general, we received the result saying that about 60% of the 60%, more than 60% of the Korean people has experienced to use the e-government products or e-government systems. So still, I think that the government should try to do their best in publicizing the e-government systems and e-government products in order to get their people to know and to access to the systems as much as possible. And any government don't know that actually I don't exactly understand the question, but we are also striving to transform the internet-based e-government system to the MGov system. For instance, we have secured the budget of about 10 billion US dollars for this year in transforming to the MGov situation, MGov environment. Under that project, we are making most of the important systems can be accessed by the mobile phone or tablet PC or smartphone, smart TVs. So, but it is very natural to say that as the technology develops, we have to, as a government, should have to comply with the technology development, and we should provide more convenient and more seamless service to the people by transforming towards the government environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. I can also add that in terms of the M-government, the answer is both, because it depends on the level of development in the country. In the case of developing countries, least developed countries, they can use M-government just to pay the electrical by topping off the minutes. I think that's one way of getting to the further level of then becoming fully smartphone oriented. Mr. Chairman, I think we're out of time.
I think we are.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. So I would like to invite everybody to give a round of applause again to all our speakers and moderators.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmad, for your moderation, and thank you, speakers, for your active contribution this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the close of our morning proceedings today, and I'm very glad to announce that all participants are now invited to a luncheon hosted by the United Nations Project Office on Governance, and which will take place in the same room as yesterday. So, the room just next to this conference room to your left. And please be advised that although we are 40 minutes behind our schedule, our lunch will end at 2:30 as originally planned. So thank you very much in advance for your understanding, and please remember to come back by 2:30. Thank you.